嗯，你要不要戴帽子啊？啊，Do do I have to use what? Can you hold it?
Well, that's just gonna mess up your bladder.
哎，快点快点，站过来。哎，Run，陈友站过来。
Oh, our bus is called VIP. Okay.
他特别喜欢站在路上。哎呀，我的天，还没照下来吗？
不是照了，我想再多照一个。
你就这样子。
那不浪费胶卷。
哎，我从来为什么总是喜欢走回去？那前面肯定也有同样。
Alright, well that means we should wait for her.
好了，我上去这地方看一会儿。
That means we should wait for her.
哎呦，我这个下半身很酸，因为昨天锻炼了1个小时。
Where are you？
哎呦，
厕所不在那吗？那个就是厕所。对。那当然谁也是。怎么可能？好，上去了。
这房子什么意思啊
Fortress， I don't know。
哦，那上去了。好，来吧。哎，就是你照的话，别把那个灯塔照在我头顶上，要让它有一个 angle。
I'm videotaping. I can't. Captain. 走。哇，现在好热，真是 amazing。哦。对呀，刚才不是排进去了吗？ 几点啊？ We have
哦，这个没有这么，日本是要收那个买票的。
we have 10 minutes.
哇，这个好酷啊！哇，我聊不到了。对，这个地方很好的景啊。
Why is it folding?
有点像16树。
That's like us on the ship.
Oh yeah.
上着位。cool.哎，待会回那个船上可以吃 ice cream。
吃 ice cream。
哇，它那确实好多这种树。哦，这。
We have had a couple of shark sightings along our Maine coast this summer. In the very beginning, the lighthouses were lit with whale oil, and they used what they call a spider lamp. It had 16 wicks. After they stopped using whale oil, they converted over to kerosene. And if the lighthouse keeper had a wife, her life was not easy because every morning it would have been her job to carry a bucket of water and soap and rags and wash the windows of the lighthouse. If you have ever had a kerosene light, you know what happens when you light it. The chimney gets all black soot. And she certainly would not have had Windex and paper towel to help her out. After she cleaned the windows, her job wasn't over because she would have had to wash those rags to get them ready for another day. If the lighthouse keeper was lucky, he had a small area of land where he could have a small garden. And because we have a relatively short growing season here in Maine, he would have been growing things like potatoes, beets, onions. Maybe he would have had access to go hunting for some fresh meat. And of course he'd always have plenty of fish. All of our lighthouses are not right here on the mainland. As you saw, the Ram Island light that sits out. So I always like throwing some fun facts out at my passengers, give them a little overview of our state of Maine. Maine is the largest of the New England states. We make up 6 states called New England states, the other 5 being New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. As I said, we have 3,500 miles of coastline. We have 33,000 square miles of land. And you could take the other 5 New England states and put them right area-wise into our state of Maine. Maine, up until 1820, was part of Massachusetts. Then something that we call the Missouri Compromise. That was when Maine and Missouri became states at the very same time. Back then, in order to become a state, you had to have an equal number of free states and an equal number of slave states. So Maine entered as the free state and Missouri entered as the slave state. Originally, our capital was in Portland. Today, our capital is in Augusta, which is centrally located. At the present time, we have a Democrat female governor. Her name is Janet Mills. She's in her second term as our governor. We have 2 state senators, Independent Angus King, former governor of Maine, and Republican Susan Collins. Our state bird is the black-capped chickadee, and our state flower is the pine cone and tassel from the white pine tree. 87% of our state is still covered in trees. And the difference is that back in the 16 and 1700s, we had a lot of white pine. Today we have more leafy, deciduous trees like what we have over here in the park. Out in the park. If you were a property owner back in the 16 and 1700s when we still belonged to Great Britain, if you had these white pines growing on your land, the King's Army would come on your land. They would measure your trees, and if these white pine were somewhere between 150 and 200 feet high, they would take a hatchet, and in the bark of the tree they would cut the sign of the broad arrow, which was 2 diagonal lines and a center line in the middle. Anytime they placed that sign on your trees, that was letting you know that you were no longer in ownership of those trees. If you were caught cutting them down, taking them for your own personal use, then you would have been severely fined and punished. At a later time, they would come back on your land with their saws and their axes. They would saw those trees down right at ground level. Then they'd chop off all the branches, and with the help of oxen, they would haul them to our rivers. Many of our large rivers here in Maine empty out into the Atlantic Ocean. So this river that we're going to be crossing here in just a moment, this was one of those logging rivers. And they got the mast for those ships. So that shipyard that I was talking about where the Liberty ships were built, it would have been over here on the right-hand side of the coach, just beyond where you see the oil containers down at the end of the river. That would have been the South Portland shipyard. Look at your cruise ship right there. How pretty. That other vessel that you see right there in front of your ship, that is one of the Casco Bay ferries that service the islands here in Casco Bay. We're going to get a little bit better look at them when we're up on the eastern prom. This is one of the newer businesses here on the Portland waterfront, just over here on the right. The containerization shipping. Right now they're shipping blueberries. They're shipping blueberries out of Maine. Maine produces 95% of all the blueberries in the country.
Huh.
And these are little tiny blueberries. Companies like Duncan Hines and Betty Crocker, just to name a couple, are the biggest users of our Maine blueberries. Finest examples of Italian villa architecture in the entire country. Nope, nobody's getting out. It was built by a gentleman by the name of Ruggles Sylvester Morse. Mr. Morse, born here in Maine, grew up very poor, decided at a young age he was going to move away, do something great, and come back to Maine. He left Maine, he moved to Boston, got a job in the hotel business. From there, he moved down to New Orleans, again got a job in the hotel business. He made a lot of friends, he made a lot of money. So this is the Victoria Mansion. It is lovely. About 10 years ago, it went through a multi-million-dollar renovation. We're good. We can continue right straight. Yep, all the way up to the very end. I like pointing out the houses over here on the left coming up, the townhouses. I call this the mustache block. Don't they look like mustaches over all the windows? In an early beginning dry summer, and there were children playing with fireworks down on the Portland waterfront. They were playing in a boatyard, and by accident they started a fire that got out of control. The fire department went down to the waterfront to put the fire out, and back then they were the old pumpers. They dropped their hoses into Portland Harbor. Unfortunately, it was low tide. The hoses didn't reach. The winds came up, and by the end of the day, on July 5th, more than 1,500 buildings had been destroyed, and more than 10,000 people left homeless. Up until that point, up until the Chicago fire, Portland's fire was the largest in the country. I guess if it had to happen, it was probably a good thing that it happened in July and not in October or November. At least it gave them a chance to start to rebuild. And up until that point, this area that we're traveling to now, this was considered to be a view on these streets over here on the right. So I mentioned that I moved to Portland in the 1960s. If I had had $5,000, who at 18 in 1960 has $5,000? I would have been able to buy one of these Queen Anne Victorian cottages over here on the left. There are 4 of them. Brick, leaded glass windows, slate roof. The 4 of them, they're all different from each other. I could have bought one for about $5,000. 2 years ago, one sold for $2.1 million. That would have been a heck of an investment. Jerry, do you know what they're doing over here on the left? What they're building? I haven't been able to find out anything. Over here on the right, this is the second oldest cemetery in the city of Portland. There hasn't been anyone buried in our 2 old cemeteries over 125 years. When I came by the Eastern Cemetery this morning, I know that they were doing some kind of a dig on one of the old graves, so we'll see how that's progressing when we do our eastern side of the city. So a lot of the homes up here on the western prong were built after that fire in 1866. And you'll notice that they are large homes, all different styles. We have colonial, we have Tudor, we have Georgian, we have Victorian, Queen Anne. They have beautiful slate roofs. Still single family residences. The next one coming up here on the right, to me it looks like something out of Gone with the Wind. Georgian in style. Around Halloween they really decorate it all up with ghosts and goblins and pumpkins, and they have ghosts in the windows, and I did a a walk through that house about 5 years ago, right before COVID, and a friend of mine, they had an open house and we went. And I walked in and I walked up to the top of the stairs and the hair on the back of my neck stood right up straight. So I tell people now, boy, they don't need to put ghosts in the windows because they have the real thing. Just ahead of us here, coming up on the left, is a statue of Thomas Brackett Reed. He was Speaker of the House at the same time Abraham Lincoln was president. And if you look way off in the distance there on the left, you probably can just barely make out the White Mountains of New Hampshire. Mount Washington over there in the distance. 60 miles away, 60 miles away. So we're making a right-hand turn, going down to the second stop sign and make a left. That's our Maine Medical Center there on the left as we turn the corner. Back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, most of the property up here belonged to one gentleman. His name was John James Bundy Brown, and Mr. Brown made his money in the sugar business. He owned sugar refineries down on the Portland waterfront. They would bring sugar cane from the Caribbean here to Portland. His company would refine it, turn some of it into sugar, some of it into molasses. Then they would load it back on those ships, take it back to the Caribbean, and a lot of it would be turned into rum. They would then load that rum back on ships, set sail for Europe, drop off the rum, come back with all kinds of artifacts, spices, and whatever, unload it here in New England, pick up another load of molasses and sugar, and head back to the Caribbean. So we had what we call a triangular trade. Our Maine Medical Center here on the left. This is the largest employer in the state of Maine, other than our state employees. The new wing, the newest wing, is the white section that you can see right there on the left. There are two helicopter pads up there on the new addition. One for military helicopters and one for rescue. One of the So this is Congress Street. This is our main street. Like Boston, we have a lot of brick buildings. Coming up ahead of us in a moment on the right is the Neil Dow House, this little brick house coming up. Neil Dow was the father of Prohibition, right here on the right. Prohibition was born right here in Portland, Maine. He said he was sick and tired of walking to work in the morning and finding folks still drunk on the sidewalk in doorways, so he fought hard for Prohibition. Not that it lasted a whole long time, but he fought for it anyway. So this is Longfellow School. Whoa! Hold me just a few minutes. For many years, this red brick building here on the right, this was the largest hotel in the state of Maine. Today there are shops on the first floor and then housing from the second floor and up. I'd like to point out the architecture on this next building coming up here on the left. Beautiful red sandstone and granite. Used to be our library for many years. Now it's part of the Arts District. So we're going to continue right here on Congress Street, and we're coming up to Congress Square. This area of Portland is known as the Arts District. Ahead of us on the right, in just a moment, another large red brick building. This is our Portland Museum of Art, and it was designed by I.M. Pei. Many of you will recognize that name. And I had kind of forgot free on Fridays. So I'm sure many of you will be able to relate to my next statement, and that is, as soon as they built a mall outside of our downtown died. That mall was built back in the 1970s, and it took about 25 years before this area of Portland was an area where people wanted to come and spend time. Today, with our 200 restaurants that we have here in our downtown area, it's interesting to note too, oh gee, that lady belongs on our coach. She's got purple hair and a purple bag and purple pants. Portland has become known as a foodie city. 2 years ago, Bon Appetit magazine listed Portland as #1 foodie city in the whole country. Over here on the right, where you see this Rennie's building, this used to be our Woolworth's building, our Miss Woolworth. Here on the right, Maine College of Art. For many years, this was the largest department store here on Congress Street. And where you see the CVS Pharmacy sign here on the right, that was our W.T. Grant store. So we kind of miss all that. Over here on the left, this is the boyhood home of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, this brick house right here on the left. Henry was born here in Portland back in 1807. Graduated from Portland High School, moved up to Brunswick, Maine to Bowdoin College. From there he moved to Cambridge, to Harvard. He settled in Harvard. In the center we have Our Lady of Victory statue. If you look at the top of her helmet, you'll notice that it has an iron spike sticking out of the top of it. And they put that there purposely to keep the seagulls and pigeons off the head. Henry doesn't have one, and trust me, his hair gets white in the course of the summer until we have a nice summer rain. So now I'm going to take you back to October of 1771. Just over here, coming up ahead of us in a moment on the left, is going to be the First Parish Church of Portland. But back in 1771, it was a meeting house, a wooden meeting house called Old Jerusalem. And it was the tallest building here on the peninsula. When Captain Henry Mowat and his English fleet sailed into Portland Harbor, this was the building that they bombarded with cannonballs. They completely destroyed Portland, sailing out of the harbor and leaving her burning. After the war, they took some of those old cannonballs that hadn't exploded. They took all of the explosives out and they turned them into chandeliers that now hang in this old church. And whenever they do something like that, we call that Yankee ingenuity. So we just traveled through our downtown area. Now we're going to head up to the eastern promenade. Our present day City Hall, just over here on the left, built with granite, quarried right here in the state of Maine. It has a beautiful green copper roof. Central Fire Station here on the right. More housing for seniors over there on the left in that brick building. For many years that was the tallest building here in the state of Maine. And then just beyond it, also on the left, is the spires to the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception, home to the Bishop of Maine. Those are our courthouses, both our federal and our county courthouse. And this park was left as a fire break after that fire in 1866. Because everything here on the right-hand side of the coach, all the way up the hill, is the area that burned in that fire. way, you see the Irish flags flying. Somebody asked me, that Irish church is just there on the right. And you can see all kinds of festival going on. So if you're looking for Italian food, right here on the corner of India and Newberry Street. They even paint the sidewalks Irish. Not Irish, Italian. Did I say Irish? I'm sorry, Italian. Oldest cemetery in Portland here on the right. And they were digging over here this morning. I don't know if they finished it up or what they were doing. They were doing something there this morning. I don't know. They replaced whatever they were doing. So, we're climbing up what we call Mundray Hill. And up at the very top of the hill, on the right-hand side, is going to be the Portland Observatory. And as I said, all of this area over here on the right is what burned in that fire. That fire came all the way up within about 25 feet of this tower. This is one of the oldest and last signal towers in the entire country. I know it looks like a lighthouse, but it's actually a signal tower. And it was built back in 1807 by Samuel Moody. Mr. Moody built this, no, we don't have to. Mr. Moody built that tower because local merchants asked him if he could build a tower on the tallest point in the city, have somebody up there at the very top of it with a telescope looking out into the bay, watching for incoming ships. As the ships would come into the harbor, they would fly that ship's flag right at the very top. That would let folks on land know which ships were coming into the harbor. And if you were a longshoreman, you should get down and empty her cargo. And if you had loved ones, hopefully they were returning home to you safe and sound. Now, Portland was settled back in 1632 by George Cleves and Richard Tucker. And they formed a community right on the Portland waterfront. Over the years, Portland has been destroyed 4 different times. Twice in the 1600s, then by the British in the 1700s, and that fire in 1866. As we make our right-hand turn here onto the eastern prom, right directly in front of us, we have our Tucker Cleves Memorial, and around the base of it are the 4 names that Portland has been known as. Native Americans called her Mashagon. The English arrived and called her Casco and Falmouth, and then later she took her name of Portland. Every year on the 4th of July, people come up here early on the right. There's 2 big bushes, those are hydrangea, and they grow that large because of all the moisture that they get coming off the bay. Just a little bit further up, just not too far around the corner, but like, yeah, if you can park right across from that white van, that would be perfect. Beautiful. Yep, right here. 'Cause they love you. Thank you. Yep. That's perfect. Thank you. So over here on the left-hand side of the coach, this is Fort Allen. Its completion, the city of Portland said, that's it, no more. We are not building high-rises blocking the views of the homes on the eastern promenade. So that is the only high-rise on the waterfront side of the harbor. If you're looking to move here, there is a condo available in this building here on the left. 2nd floor, $2.3 million. But you always have a nice view of Portland Harbor. Also ahead of us here, coming up on the left in a moment, is going to be what used to be the Portland Company back in the 1850s. they built locomotives for the railroad. Now these next few buildings over here coming up on the left, they've only been here for about 4 years. And some of them are owned by WEX, W-E-X, and some of them are part of the Rue Institute. The houses you can imagine over here on this boulder, just over here on the right. On that boulder there is a plaque, and it states that at one time this was the location of the birth home of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. They tore it down many years ago. So we're going to continue right here up to Franklin Arterial, and then I'll be taking you back to the ship. I hope you have enjoyed your brief stay. That is the Italian area right up there where all the flags are. That's where the festival's going on if you're interested. It's just a couple of streets up from where your ship is. We are going to ask everyone, please remain seated until we come to a complete stop. We'll give you some time to look around your seats. In the overhead, make sure that you take everything with you that you may have brought on board today or have purchased. If you get back on board the ship and realize you left something here on board, please feel free next week to check on eBay.
I just burned my throat. Oh, we got it.